Okay, I think we are between coffee and a project here, but you can see what's going on, right? Like the entire industry is stuck right now in just LLMs and how to figure it out. And this talk is really around how do we use it in a domain, right? A networking domain, a telecom domain. So we have a project called Essedum that just came into the Linux Foundation networking. And so I want to make sure that, as we get into domain-specific AI, which is actually using these things, because LLM is like, for us, it's one piece. It's important, but who cares, right? How do you make real money and how do you serve your real customers, right? How do you productize it? That's kind of what we're going to talk about. So, very interesting. Okay, so for those of you who are not familiar with the telecom infrastructure and how we connect, goes from left to right, access, mobile, fixed, enterprise access, etc., into edge computing, two types of edges, user edge, service provider edge, and then goes into some version of a cloud back into a core. And a core is really where most of the action is. That's where Kubernetes runs. That's where the entire networking stack runs. This stack has everything from your data plane acceleration to control plane to orchestration to Kubernetes operators for networking like Nefio, all the way up into the applications or workloads, as we call it on the IT side. And in our case, we call it CNFs, Cloud Native Network Function. So you can see the whole stack, and Essedum in general and AI needs to span the entire stack. So with this background, this project Essedum and Celis, and I'll get to both of those, was announced in March, donated by our Platinum member Infosys. And before I get to the project, I want to set the context of how we at the Linux Foundation think about AI, okay? Because there is AI and then there is AI, right? And then there's AI. So the way we are thinking about it is, and this is true for anything, there is domain-specific AI, whether it's telecom, whether it's energy, whether it's manufacturing, any of these vertical industries. And that's the blue on the top and the blue on the bottom. So blue on the bottom is the infrastructure, okay? Your IT infrastructure, your network infrastructure. It has a bunch of open source projects. It has a bunch of data sets, which are domain specific. In case of telecom, our data is rich. Network data from a Deutsche Telekom or a China Mobile or a Verizon, extremely rich data sets. People in the cloud space would love to use that data set to learn, but it has proprietary and private information. So how do you manage all of that in context of a telecom network and your GDPR requirements and your PII requirements and things like that? That's all a domain-specific problem. On the top, you have domain-specific use cases. I want to use AI for beamforming. Well, nobody cares who's using ChatGPT on what a beamforming is, but that's one of the most important use cases for the radio access network. So the use cases for telecom, the use cases, and then there might be models that are very tuned and custom to telecom. So that's the top and the bottom. And then anything that is generic is in the middle. And so our sister organization, LFAI and Data, hosts all of those, right? The generic models, the generic data, the generic AI infrastructure, all of that stuff. And the domain specific is hosted by LF Networking. If you talk about energy, it's hosted by LF Energy, right? So I just want to make sure people understand that there is life beyond LLMs. And we need to look at the big picture also. So we have two projects that are relevant in this space, Essedum and Celis. Essedum is an AI framework, Celis is responsible AI, and we'll get into the details of this right now. So how do we actually productize this? Okay, how do we productize AI in a domain-specific application. So what happens today? If I'm an end user and I want to take advantage of AI to create my app that is relevant in my domain, what do I do today? Okay, so what do I do today is I don't know why it's doing that and not just a page flip, but what I do today is I test in some sandbox. Okay, I borrow some AI software that exists in my enterprise. There's some AI stores, I take some of that. Basically, application layer, I do something. And then I have to integrate it with control, management, orchestration, all of the MLOps as we call it. Then I might use some accelerator services, right, like visual or data privacy or vision or text language or whatever. There's a whole bunch of libraries that exist, and you may want to pull a few things here and there. And then on top of that, you have to do the lifecycle management, right? The governance, the model-related lifecycle, the data, the assurance, the monitoring, all of that. And then I have a whole bunch of places either I need to run or serve, right? Cloud, public cloud, private cloud, etc. So all of this work is done per AI app, right? So every new application I have to deploy, I have to integrate this, right? And that's where I think Essedum comes in, which is it simplifies your life with the AI framework. Okay, so effectively, all you need to worry about is your application. Plug it into the framework will take care of everything else. Okay, now frameworks also will proliferate, right? There will be tons and tons of framework. You need to look at, do you need a domain-specific framework or do you need a generic one? Do you need a scalable one for that market? So there's all these questions, but the good news is these frameworks have been really well documented and tested, and they connect to a cloud, they connect to data sources, they connect to accelerator services, and then you can add your own application on top. So that's the general concept of Essedum and what it does. A little bit more detailed is all the things you need to do for MLOps, right? So take your enterprise data, your knowledge, your pipeline, your model, your things, get it into the accelerators, right? And these are just like API calls, so it's not terribly complex. And then get into the governance aspects, which I'll talk about in just a bit, okay? So let's double click these. So the top layer is really around connection, data sources, pipelines, and the MLOps. So what do? You create these connections, right? These are, as I said, right, just straight REST APIs. And then there's things you need to do for each of these clouds. And then you integrate it with the data sources that you have, and then you create the pipeline. Now, this is all done for you in the framework. Otherwise, you'll have to do it per application, as I said. Okay, and then you work the rest of it. The last point, establishing guardrails, is very important, because as you start deploying it in domains, your models will not necessarily be the most accurate, right? The generic models are trained for generic questions because they are using generic data sets. Domain-specific models are trained for domain-specific things, right? So I'll give you one example of telecom that is very critical. So as I said, we have data sets in LF networking from some of the largest top-tier telcos. These data sets are extremely critical, and they need to be harnessed so that these models can be fine-tuned for that data, right? But you can't ship them to any models because of privacy reasons. So we have a project inside LFN called THOTH, T-H-O-T-H, which now runs in as a plugin to Essedum, and it does data anonymization. Okay, so it will translate the data in such a way that it's an essential app, right? Like, it will help the data to be in such a format that it doesn't have all the privacy information, for example. and that's just one example, right? But that can be a direct plug-in, and it gets pulled into the library of this framework that allows you to now write your own apps. And you don't have to worry about which data set because it's already sort of doing anonymization, okay? So then let's look at the lowest layer, which is responsible AI. So that is a separate project that is now also open sourced under the Linux Foundation called Salus. And it's a toolkit. This toolkit is extremely important because it has multiple features that are needed before you deploy your AI application. So we have things like security. So any application that you deploy, are you protected against vulnerabilities and attacks? As I said, it's connected back-end into Essedum through data privacy. So sensitive information, privacy requirements, EU requirements, India requirements, US requirements, they all are taken care of. And then, a whole bunch of other features. Fairness and bias is an important one. Left-hand, right-hand problem, everybody's like familiar with that. If you ask a tool to do something, or ChatGPT or anything, show me a hand or draw something, they'll always take the right hand. That's a bias. Don't want to go into other biases, but there are guardrails that you can use to and then enhance to prevent that, right? And this is cloud agnostic, by the way. So this code is on GitHub as well. If you want to sort of take a look at what it does and how it does it, okay? So let's take an example, right? So we have one of our other platinum members, SoftBank, one of the largest carriers from Japan, and how they would use it, right? So they have a solution called AITRIS, and it's along with NVIDIA, and they have it all packaged up as a solution. Now, what you'll do is you can deploy this framework, AI framework, Essedum, in a continuous manner where you're consuming these models in this plugin that is shown, and then continuously deploying it in production. Okay, so as users and they could be enterprise users trying to ask enterprise, and when I say enterprise, it's like the telco as an enterprise, right? Your own internal stuff. You can do that as well. So these are just examples. I'm not going to solve everything here, but there will be proprietary software you need to drag in along with that. So I'm not going to claim here everything is open source. The purple boxes are open source. So obviously the guardrails, the models, the data, the connections, but everything else you can bring in, which is customizations, your specific requirements, your specific enterprise use cases. And again, I'm showing this in example of a telco, but you can do this in any enterprise for any AI applications, right? You can just start from here. And customization is allowed. Okay, so I think to wrap it up, and I know we are running ahead of time, but it's coffee, so it's good. We have this framework. It is on GitHub. It's open sourced. We announced it yesterday at the keynote stage where the code is in, and it is integrating, several sets of applications, and take a look at it for your domain, whether you're in telecom, networking, finance, energy, things like that. Here is the mailing list. These slides will be posted on the event AI Dev thing, so you can do that. But it's all under LF Networking website, and join the mailing list if you want. Cool. I kept it very quick and fast. I know, I'm between coffee and you, so enough for an introduction. Once, because you have spent a whole day figuring out how a VLLM works and how LM cache is going to be tuned and all that stuff. Right? Been there, done that. It's tiring. Sorry. So I just thought we'll abstract it up. Okay. So thank you, and if you have questions, I'm here. Okay.